Welcome to Getting to Know You. We always add staff and residents of Stonebridge. Today we're adding a place. Welcome to Getting to Know our Meadow. I'm very happy that we're doing a little retrospective from the garden party. We're wearing hats that we wore at the garden party. Doreen Maloof and our friend Jean Mahoney. And we're here to make sure that you have an opportunity to hear something that's very special about our grounds, about Stonebridge, about our commitment, and also to find out what we can do to have a good future, because Jean Mahoney is going to be the chair of the grounds committee coming up in this year, and that's where the care of the meadow falls with Doreen Maloof, of course, adding her expertise. So what we'd like to do right now is give you the opportunity to hear about the creation of the meadow. It wasn't always there. And if you were a prospect coming to Stonebridge at the time of the garden party, you would have heard Doreen give this like summary of this thing we're very proud of. But you weren't, and most residents weren't there either. So the first thing we're going to do is ask Doreen to basically tell us what she told the people at the day of the garden party. And then we'll switch a little bit and hear from Jean about what she's planning for the grounds committee. And then we want to assure all of ourselves that there's a real future for the meadow. So Jean, thanks for coming and sitting in with us. I happen to know from your background before Stonebridge that you're a master gardener, and having lived in Princeton, you were one of the real stalwarts of making sure we had shade trees and things were preserved that we wanted to see growing from year to year. So it's great to have you here. And Doreen, I've already given you a little introduction, but one of the things that you did, as I mentioned, was come up with a wonderful way of understanding the meadow here, but also the importance of meadows. So I'm going to turn to you to pretend you're standing out there in the garden up high on your podium sort of, and explaining to people who had no idea of what our meadow is all about, what it is all about. So you're up.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here to talk about the meadow. When we first visited here, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, I found the meadow really appealing. It was one of the things that made me want to come here, because I really enjoyed the grounds and I liked the meadow. And that was in the early years of this meadow. When the community opened, that whole area in front of our community was covered with a lush and lovely lawn. And many people really liked that look. But there were some residents here who began to think about the ecological advantages of having a meadow. A meadow sequesters more water. It provides a habitat for lots of birds and bees and small creatures. And its very diversity is beneficial to our environment. So when I got here, when we finally moved in 2019, we were struck by how many invasives were in the meadow, particularly mugwort and dodder. But in among them, there were still some flowers blooming. At the time that it was created, they removed all of the grass and actually planted seed. So the first couple of years, they had a lot of flowers blooming. I think from the pictures I've seen, many of these plants were annuals. So before long, the flowers began to die back and all those invasives moved in, as well as lots of grasses. So the first thing I did when I got here was check with Mark to see if I could work on the meadow a little bit. He said fine. And I started buying wildflower seeds. I planted in the fall mostly perennial wildflower seeds, mostly natives, many native to New Jersey. And then in the spring, I planted annuals. Perennials in the fall because they do well in the ground over the winter, annuals in the spring because they can't tolerate frost. And since then, I've repeated that pattern, I guess 3 times. And many of us are noticing there's a lot more wildflowers out there now. It's certainly not all wildflowers. There's plenty of grasses, plenty of invasives, but in among them, lots of beautiful wildflowers are starting to grow and develop and spread. So as I think about this meadow, I realize that we need to have a plan for continuing to plant wildflowers year after year. And this year, the Residents Association has allocated some funds to help in that effort. So that's a little bit of progress that we've made this year. When I gave this talk at the garden party, which by the way is this was our second garden party, and I believe it's become an annual tradition. The walk through the meadow is part of the garden party, and our goal is to educate educate visitors, in this case people possibly interested in moving here as well as residents, about the benefits of the meadow and the beauty of the flowers. So after I gave this little talk about the past, we then walked through the meadow and I identified a few flowers and talked about each of them for a little bit of time, just to give people kind of an awareness of the flowers that were currently blooming in the meadow. One of the things I was telling Ingrid earlier that I've noticed since I've been here is that wildflowers come in waves. Early in the spring, the red columbine is very common out there. Beautiful New Jersey wildflower, red and yellow, very, very lovely. After that, wild blue indigo comes along. And then there are waves of other flowers. There's other wildflowers blooming among them, but these are such startling flowers that you really notice them. Right now, we're awash in Queen Anne's lace, an absolutely beautiful wildflower, stunning in its intricacy, really. And we also have lots of false sunflower, sometimes called oxeye sunflower. And among them, there are many others, but those are the ones that are standing out most abundantly at this point in time.
There were beautiful orange ones out there for a while.
Yes, that's, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name, just let me think for a minute. Monarch butterflies love it. It's butterfly weed, there we go.
Oh.
And it's one of the best pollinators for monarchs. The larvae feed on the leaves, and the butterflies themselves come for pollen. And for the nectar that they produce. They're very abundant nectar producers. And when they catch the pollen on their little bodies, bees and butterflies, they spread them around to the other wildflowers. Pretty soon we'll be seeing asters. Those will be the predominant flowers in the fall. We have both blue, purple, and some kind of a light violet color. And there are also very showy flowers and very beneficial for the pollinators that need them in their migration going south.
Can I ask you about the drought?
Oh,
the miracle does the meadow do a better job
yes.
Of maintaining itself without rain?
I would say yes. Most of these wildflowers are really drought resistant. They can tolerate water if it happens to rain, but they do pretty well even when there isn't much rain. So as I mentioned, I pick wildflowers that are natives, wildflower seeds that are for native plants, plants that will grow to be good nectar producers, so that we can benefit butterflies and birds and bees. But the other criteria is that they have to be able to handle drought because we don't have any water out there. And I haven't been bringing buckets of water out there.
Please don't. I think another feature of it, as we are sort of the pedestrians of the meadow, is that we can walk through it. And that anybody can walk through it or go on their little scooter or something. And I think that's a wonderful feature of it, that it is so accessible. We don't have to just drive by it or stand in the street to enjoy it. So it really is a benefit to all of us.
I think that's true. And I spend a lot of time out there, as you might imagine. And it's very common for me to see people who live in our neighborhood, who don't live in this community, but they live in the surrounding streets, who walk through. And many times they mention that they're really glad to see that we're concerned about this as an environmental contribution, that they like the idea that we're trying to create some diversity in the landscape and that we care about and trying to nurture bees and butterflies and small mammals. Lots of rabbits out there too. I'm interested in seeing rabbits as well as butterflies.
And a deer.
And deer occasionally. Oh, and I didn't mention that. I've been trying to find seeds for wildflowers that will, when they grow, will be deer resistant. So most of the material that we're planting out there is deer resistant and rabbit resistant, which is important here because we have a huge population of rabbits wandering around.
Right. Well, with that introduction, the question raises, we have to go on with the Meadow, and the Meadow is part of the grounds committee, but the grounds committee does other things. And Jean, I know that since you've taken over the chair of the grounds committee, you do so with a little background. Can you tell us what you were doing in Princeton with the Trinity Church, your experience there?
Well, I'm the chair of the grounds committee at Trinity Church. I've been on that grounds committee for about 15 years. It's similar. It looks a little bit like our greenway out there in the by the clubhouse, and there are many trees that we oversee. We oversee the planting. We also just do decorative pots by the entrances to the church, and we have a couple of really nice, cute little gardens that we maintain. Lovely. But we do have people who do all the heavy lifting for us.
As we do here at Stonebridge. We have to make sure we say that. But you have people who are interested in working with you.
Right, parishioners who like to, like to work with us, and I'm sure, and we do have them here too.
Yeah.
People here who are interested in.
So you are going to be starting up in September.
Right.
People who have been taking responsibility for it before you have trained a group of people. What do they do who are on the garden committee?
The
grounds
committee?
Yeah.
Well, it's an advisory committee, I believe, because all of us have had gardens, but we're not interested in carrying water and doing all the good things that Doreen does. But we will advise how to manage the beautiful grounds. And we're very interested in the history and of all of the wonderful grounds and our heritage here.
And so people are out there wearing their aprons, taking care of some things like deadheading plants. Is that what you
One
call
of
it?
the groups that belongs, that under the grounds committee is the garden club. And they are just the most enthusiastic people. They come and they deadhead flowers and they water the pots and they do anything that needs to be done to keep these little guys in bloom and make them look lovely. And I think that the grounds really benefit from their care. It's lovely. And Doreen is really the one responsible for getting all these volunteers. They do a great job.
Well, I think it's terrific that people take an interest and are also able to use the expertise that they've gained over years of caring for their own gardens and being able to do a service to the community. And I think we all recognize that the commercial landscape and garden care is needed as far as our lawns are concerned, but to really have that human touch that you all have given is something that's really valued here. So there we have it. We've had a little understanding that it was really a group of people here because they cared about the environment and getting something started. But nothing ever continues without thinking about it and caring for it. And we've seen that happen. But now we're thinking about the future and a new committee being formed in September. And I guess when we think about it, the Meadow, in a way, is what we all have to think about of how we can live more wisely in a world that's constantly changing. I like to think that what you're doing here is making a small contribution to caring about the future here because we care about our planet. It's a way of creating an example and thinking that we can actually contribute to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is, we hope, a time for you to get to know the Meadow, and that for you who haven't experienced it, that you will get out there and see it close up and value the work that fellow residents at Stonebridge have put into making this such a wonderful place to walk, to simply be inspired by our surroundings. So thank you for listening to Getting to Know You. Thank you to Doreen.
Thank you.
And to Jean for all your work and your inspiration. And next year, watch for the garden party. There'll be something else interesting to do at that time, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.